Hi, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of our podcast, AAPI Reaching Across the Aisle. So, today we're going to first introduce ourselves and touch on a few of the general ideas this podcast will cover, as well as a few stories about our background. So, first, I'm going to hand the reins over to my co host, Brian. Go ahead, Brian.
Yes, I'm Brian. I'm a Filipino American. Lived pretty much in the South, 10 years here on the West Coast. And we're going to share some of our experiences among the Asian community.
All right, and my name is Edward, your other co host here at Reaching Across the Aisle. I am a Chinese American guy. I was born and raised here in Southern California. I traveled a bit around the world, but I spent most of my time here. I dabbled a little bit in academic debate, so that is my background. So I'll try to keep things more grounded and more, excuse me, not more, I'll try to keep things more like, a lot more like scientific and like detailed, evidence based. And Brian's gonna try to keep me human and not get lost in with my head in the cloud. So hopefully we balance each other out and try to come to a better understanding for both each other and you, our dear listeners. So today's topic is going to be about Asian racism, specifically Asians being racist towards other Asians. And Brian, you wanted to talk today about the phrase "Stop Asian Hate." Is that right?
Yes, that's exactly right.
Okay, so
And
why don't
we're
you go
going
ahead and
to.
get us started on that?
Okay, well, as we can see, when we heard about the Asian hate, mostly the senior citizen Asians getting killed by other ethnicities. That was definitely a tragic. However, what I'm here to discuss is Asians protesting, Asians posting all over their social media about Stop Asian Hate. I find it a bit hypocritical.
Okay.
Hypocritical meaning it's the same Asians I see that I know personally who are saying Stop Asian Hate. I'm calling them out saying, well, what about Asians hating other Asians? And there are
Okay.
many factors that can support saying that. So, like, example, um, for example, let's say like Asian women preferring white guys over Asian guys. Okay, for the most part, when I hear all the reasons on why they prefer white guys over Asian guys, it's really a bunch of crap without any evidence backing up the reasons why. And I'll go ahead and get started. For example, I'm a Filipino. I'm in
Okay.
my 40s. And, Philippine women, I love my Philippine women. I love Asian women.
Very good, sir.
However, I don't have much luck with Philippine women. And a lot of it has to do with the fact, the first thing they'll say is, sorry, buddy, but I only like white guys. And, I'm like, okay, what's wrong with Filipinos? This has been going on for the past 20 years. I've heard of some other Filipino American guys, and it's always reasons of, well, Filipino men cheat, white men don't cheat, white men make more money, Filipino men don't make as much money, the offspring is going to be blue eyes and white skin. And I'm here to prove that that is actually not true.
Okay, so let
So,
me let me make sure I got
okay.
this. Let me make sure I heard you right. So you're saying the common reasons you hear Filipino women claim that they prefer a Caucasian partner is because of faithfulness, the kids' genetic outcomes or their looks, and also the increased income that's associated with Caucasian men. Is that right? Did I get everything?
Correct.
Okay. Well, I mean, before we get into the nitty gritty of those claims, and we will get into those claims, let me just back us up a second and talk about why do you think um, it's hypocritical for Asians to say that targeted hate crimes towards their senior citizens is related at all to Asian women showing a preference outwardly away from their own race. What is the relationship between those two things that causes hypocrisy?
Well, as far as what's going on about the Asians getting murdered, that's more physical. Okay, towards as far as Asians, it's more verbal. It's more verbal assault, basically, meaning like, for example,
Uh
they
huh.
look at me, knowing me. They'll just say, like, if I'm at a party, I'm invited, and you introduce people. I've had many Philippine women say, just to let you know, buddy, I only like white guys, stuff like that. That's just ridiculous. Or with me being like, the only basically sex symbol model that's been successful out of pure blood Asians, I get a lot of flack from the Asian community. They'll say stuff like, "No way, you're not half Asian. You're not half Asian, so you can't be attractive to other women." Um, Also, too, like getting entertainment. I love audition for Hollywood films, for example. A lot of them say, "Well, no, nobody wants to see a pure blood Asian guy with dark skin. They want to see a half white, half Asian." So I'll argue back with them. I says, "Well, what is your knowledge on that being true? Okay, do you have any facts to back that up? Because what I proved, what I am, is you're disagreeing with me because you think because I'm pure Asian, white privilege is above me." So, for example, like the white men make more money. That is statistically false. The average salary for Filipinos in America is $90,000 versus white people at 65,000. Okay, Indians rate number one. Okay, so I tell them, how can that be so when Filipinos, on average, make more money? Now, I'm not a rich guy, but I'm not a poor guy either. I'm a middle class guy. And just like the faithfulness, this is a fact too. More interracial marriages in America end up in divorce than people are married to the same race. That's actually a fact. Okay, I
Okay,
look it up
well,
on many different sources, and they say the same thing. Now, if you want to go by my personal opinion from what I've witnessed throughout my whole life, I would agree. Because a lot of Philippine women married to white guys versus Philippine women married to Filipino guys, I see way more divorces with the white husbands versus the Philippine husbands. That goes around for all the Asian races, according to stats. But overall, they said that it is said that interracial marriages are generally lead up more in divorce, and that is a lot to do with the fact they say it's cultural differences. That's a lot to do with the reason, and they think, like they said, it's going to be more faithful, and it's not statistically. It's not true. As far as the babies go, I mean, I grew up by an air base. I lived in 3 different states. So I met a lot of half Asian, half white, and in particular for Filipinos, a lot of them tend to look more Hispanic. None of them that I know of have blue eyes. They have anywhere from fair skin to dark skin, just like pure blood Filipinos. And it's just really a false narrative what they're leading on. I mean, if you're a Filipino American over the age of 27, you're single, and you want a Philippine woman in your age range, it's very hard to find one here because they're going to tell you, and I've interviewed many Filipino guys who said the same exact thing. A lot of them who want a Filipino woman have to go to the Philippines. Now, people would debate and say, well, Brian, I see Filipino couples all the time here. I can break that down. The majority of Philippine couples in the United States, I'm talking about marriage, people who are married couples, are from the Philippines. I can count on both my fingers how many Philippine couples I met that are married, that are over the age of 27. And one thing they all share in common, they were together since college. And as far as the faithfulness goes, why they say Filipino men, why Filipino don't cheat, every Philippine woman I have encountered, including the men, other Filipino men around the country, Philippine women I say, well, when I was 19 years old in college, I fell in love with a Filipino boy, same age as me, and he cheated on me. And I said, that's your reason? You're like 35 years old now and you're looking down on that? And they're just
well,
like, yeah.
I'm gonna
I mean, I
disagree.
couldn't believe I was like, what do men in college think about? Whether you're white, black, Asian, Hispanic, 19, 20-year-old men, married 20 men in college, all they really think about when it comes to fun is pussy and sports. I mean, let's face it. But you don't hear white women who get cheated on by their white boyfriend saying, oh, well, don't go for a white man because they cheat. Go for someone else. I
Okay,
don't hear that
that's
come.
fair. Okay, I understand what you're saying. That I think Filipino Americans perhaps get
JLR.
unfairly treated.
Or, I mean,
Okay, but again, I
PLW, what that stands for,
that
right?
is your experience. I don't know, so I'm just gonna take your word for it. But I totally understand you saying that. I think it's fair for you to say that Filipino Americans are unfairly penalized for cheating when people of other ethnicities and races probably cheat just as much, if not more. and they're not painted as a group as being unfaithful and cheating. That's totally fair. However, I still feel like we kind of got derailed there. So you were saying that this is more of a verbal thing and that is a physical thing. So as far as I can tell, those are two completely separate realms. So what does someone standing up and saying, "Hey, there are Asian grandmas being beat up in California and New York because they're Asian," have to do with Filipino women saying they prefer white guys? Like, those are both problems, but I don't see where's the hypocrisy here. Help me see what you're seeing here, Brian.
When you say stop Asian hate, when I meet some of the people who have protested, their claim like, why are people discriminating against us just because we're Asian? Okay, I think that's hypocrisy when I'm thinking to myself, but Asians also hate on each other too. Maybe not beating each other up over it, but there's still a lot of hate. Okay, I
Okay, so you're
mean, just
saying
like
that
Asian
there is
woman.
Asian hate.
It's not. I
Okay,
mean, like what's going on with the violence and stuff against Asian hate? Yeah, that's terrible. I would agree. I don't want that either. But if I'm gonna go protest, I don't want to be around a bunch of hypocrites and people who I know personally, Asian women, that say they hate Asian men. To me, that's racism. I don't think they have a right to be holding a sign up saying "Stop Asian Hate" when indeed they hate Asians themselves too. Now, like I said, they're not murdering people, but the fact the way their rhetoric is toward Asian men and they're holding signs "Stop Asian Hate." And that's just like me saying like, you know, I don't like gay people, but I like to suck dick. Okay, that doesn't make any sense, does it?
okay, but I
I mean,
think the
that's pure
difference
hypocrisy.
here is you hit the nail right on the head, and that is the fact that one is about murder and the other one is about dating preferences. Are you really going to equate those two things?
No, it's not really equating. It's just like
So is it really hypocritical for
you're
someone to
gonna
say, "Hey, we want our old grandmas to stop"? Because it's not about. We're not saying that young Filipino men are extremely desirable and they should be protected and they're being murdered. We're saying that grandmas are being killed for just getting their groceries, and that should stop. I don't see
this is
how that's
unfortunate. I agree with you.
hypocritical. Go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, as far as how you compare, yeah, murder is the worstest thing you do to anybody in humankind. I agree with that.
I don't. I think
But
there's things far worse than murder, but that's off topic.
yeah, yeah. I mean, murdering, old grandmas that are Asian, I mean, yeah, that's evil. I agree with that. That, I mean, Congress stepped in and they passed a strict law to make that happen. We haven't heard much happening ever since in the last year. But I'm sad to hear about that too, but I just cannot stand when I see how I'm treated. And even in the Philippines, they hear about what's going on here, and they're putting stuff on their Facebook wall, "Stop Asian Hate in America." Okay,
I think it's a
but
pretty
I
universal,
thought,
unifying theme of elderly people being beaten up to the point of dying, right? Like it's a like let me pivot again real quick. So let's take a more extreme issue, right? Like what Black Lives Matter, right? Like that is a very charged and loaded phrase. We're not going to get into the nitty gritty, but the phrase that spawned that wasn't a low level constant problem. It was one extreme event, right? It's particularly the very visible and public murder of a black man. That is what spawned that phrase. That is what spawned the protests during the summer of 2020, right? Like it's these extreme events, right? That's what catches people attention. Like I'm not trying to say that your problems don't matter, or that I'm trying to minimize this from happening, that minimize that this is happening to you and other Asian men, specifically Filipinos. But I don't feel that it's fair to call Asian women hypocritical for saying they care about grandma and not caring about their own men, because just like you, they're being affected when it's their grandma being attacked. They're not affected if they choose to not date Filipino men, right? So where's the
well,
hypocrisy in here?
the people who I personally talk to that are for the Stop Asian Hate, their grandma was not attacked. They're protests for the people who were attacked, and I'm
Okay.
all for that. I'm
But they're
all for
saying that
that.
they could have their
But
grandmas attacked, right?
the thing is, it's not an
Okay.
ongoing problem. We haven't heard over in the last year the Asian hate and violence come from the other ethnicities has slowed down quite tremendously.
So are
So
what's
yeah,
wrong with them saying they want
that
this to
problem,
stop?
yeah,
Like they're
that
saying we don't want this to
problem,
happen at all, right?
that problem is not an ongoing issue
It
now
isn't?
with the virus. Not as bad anymore.
I mean,
No.
I'm not saying it's gone away. I'm saying it's excuse me, you're not saying it's gone away, you're saying it's gone down. But I'm saying I
Yeah.
think this might be a news blind spot for you. Because my feed is filled with these sorts of stories. If you want to go and take a look at the screen, I can send you some links right now in our chat and point out to you there is a plethora of stories. Right, like I just googled Asian hate crime, and I got two from New York, and then
What's
another.
the date on that?
Excuse me.
What was the date on that Asian
3 days
hate
ago.
crime?
Two
What
days
was
ago. Actually, I take it back. These appear to all be the same story. But my point stands, which is simply that this sort of thing is still happening, right? Like, I'm not saying crime isn't crime, right? Like, a murder is a murder, and a violent attack is a violent attack. But when you humanize that, when you personalize it and say, hey, Asian grandma was attacked, and your Asian grandma could be going out in Corona, in Roland Heights, and getting groceries, but she might be robbed or mugged or attacked in a parking lot on her way home. That makes it really personal, right? Like I don't think you're obliged to
course.
care about every last subject. So if you care about something that's more personal to you, is that really hypocritical to not care about the fact that Asian men might be suffering uh, from lower dating preferences by Asian women? Like I'm not seeing the connection here, because you're saying that it's
Uh,
because they hate one form of Asian hate and they don't hate another form of Asian hate. Is that right?
what I'm trying to say is, as far as what's going on with Filipinos,
Okay.
is they're getting away from their roots. Whenever you're getting more involved, when you're getting away from it, and you're getting more involved by thinking you gotta have a white guy, and you don't want to, really associate with Filipino guys, and then you raise your kids that way, it gets away the roots. So, for example, um, what I care about is, even though I'm proud to be American, I still want to uphold my roots. But a lot of Filipinos or Filipinos, just both, whatever, both, that are raised here, the majority of them have no desire to even go to the Philippines.
Uh,
They don't, most of them don't have a desire as they get older to marry their own kind.
okay.
They don't even know really what the culture is. So when I go to the Philippines, for example, I have so many Filipinos say, "Why the hell
Right.
would you want to go there for? Why don't you go to Italy?"
Okay.
And I said, "Well, buddy, have you ever been to the Philippines?" They go, "No, never have, never will." And I says, "Then you can't judge because there's a lot of good things in the
I
Philippines,
think that's a
and
little
you are."
unfair. Really? If I
Yeah,
say if
yeah.
I
I mean,
say
I
I don't
know
want to go to
that.
Nigeria because there's an active civil war going on, that's fair, isn't it?
Is Civil War where in the Philippines?
In Nigeria, there's a whole
Nigeria.
Duarte drug crackdown thing, right? Like if I don't smoke personally, but if I was smoking weed, if I wanted to party, get high, and I don't want to go to the Philippines because if I'm caught with cocaine, I might be sentenced to jail for an extremely long time. That is a perfectly good reason to not want to go to the Philippines, isn't it?
That's not the reason why Philippine people don't want to go to
Okay,
the
that's fair. Fine,
Philippines.
tell
It's
me
like
then.
men.
Why do Filipino people, in your experience, choose to not go to the Philippines?
Okay, as far as the Filipino men raised here, they'll say,
Okay.
"Well, I know what those women want over there, and I don't like Philippine women. They just want a visa to get here." That's what I hear from the men. The women have no desire to go there. Period. Philippine women, well, I don't want to go over there. It's third world country. I say, no, it's not. It's actually moved up more second world. They have moved up. They dress very modern. They have a lot of the stuff we have here, and they still don't want to go anyway. And this is another thing too. Like the Philippine women from there who are married to all these white guys here, when they have their children, This is a big thing in Philippine families. They want their sons to marry a Filipino woman from the Philippines. When a son marries a white woman, the Filipino mother and a Filipino son have a disagreement. The son is like, "Mom, well, how can you tell me we're a Filipino when you're married to a white guy?" She says, "Because I don't like Filipino men. Filipino men are bad." And he says, "Well, like mother, like son, you don't like Filipino men, and I don't like Philippine women. And you're not going to tell me who to marry." But there's a lot of resentment in a half Asian, not just Filipinos, as far as half Asian, half white Americans go. I hear this all the time that their mothers not only want to marry an Asian woman, but then their extended relatives from their mother's side who is Asian gets mad if you can't speak their language. They'll look at you like for me, for example, if I don't speak Tagalog, and I experience this weekly at my work, I'll speak Tagalog and I says, "Well, no, I was raised here in America." And they'll say, "Well, you're not a real Filipino then." I go, "Excuse me?" They go, "You're not a real Filipino because you can't speak Tagalog." I said, "There's more to our culture than speaking a language." And I do go to the country. And I mean, just to let you know, I had one man who had his family. There's teenage kids. He said that I should be ashamed not speaking Tagalog, but I knew his kids didn't. I looked at his kids. Said, "These are your kids?" He goes, "Yeah." He says, "Hey kids, do y'all speak Tagalog?" He goes, "Unfortunately, we don't, sir. We're sorry about what our dad did." And I'm looking at dad and says, "How can you go after me on this when your own kids can't?" But the thing is there's like a big cultural difference when it comes to Philippine people even that come here. Filipino Americans don't want to date their own kind. The Philippine people that immigrate here, they think the social status is much better if they get with white men. They don't want to learn the facts about Filipino Americans. They assume if you're dark skinned, you're poor. If you're light, you're rich. And I have to constantly explain to them that this is America. Dark skin is actually sexy to people, and it's actually normal to
Yeah,
people.
I think it's fair to say there's a divide between East and
Yes.
West when it comes to say tan skin versus fair skin. That
Yeah.
is very true. But
And
let me get a word in edgewise here, Ryan. Let me talk. I'm still not totally on board with the premise. We'll discuss the specific things in a moment. But so you're saying that it's hypocritical for not Asians but Filipino women specifically to say that for Filipino women to say stop Asian hate crime specifically, to turn around and then say I'm not very keen on dating Filipino men for these untrue racist reasons. Is that what you're saying?
well, what I'm gonna say is if you're saying stop Asian hate,
Okay.
basically the whole purpose of that is it's not just stop the violent crime. Is like let's love each other for who we are and not what our ethnicity
I
is.
think that's a little
Stop.
unfair, right? It's one thing to say let's stop
Yeah.
beating. Okay, I think it's a big jump to go from hey, let's not attack each other for our innate characteristics, and me saying I like you. Those two are not the same, right? I may like tolerate and even accept a certain group. That doesn't mean I'm very keen on their culture. Like that might make me xenophobic or close minded, but that's also my right, right? Like it's also your like if you are a Christian, right? I'm not, but if you are a Christian and you like to worship Jesus in your particular way, you are not obliged to then turn around and say, yeah, I think fill in the blank church has a great way of worshiping Jesus. You don't have to do that, right? Like you it's good if you say, "Oh, it's cool that the Judeo faith has debates or maybe the Buddhist faith has comfortable with silence." You could appreciate other things. But for me to say, "Hey, we should stop attacking people based on religious group," is not the same thing as me saying you have to then turn around and like kumbaya and love every other group. Right? Is that fair? Would you agree with that statement?
Well, I see your point. I mean, like I said, I'm not against. I mean, I am totally against, what people are doing, to those Asian grandmas and grandfathers. I'm totally against that. It's just, this thing that's going on with Asians, saying like, why do people have to be discriminatory? Like, it's not just so much protest. I have nothing against protesting and protecting our Asian grandmas and grandpas. I'm not against that.
It
But
sounds
when
like
I'm
you are
hearing
against Filipino women protesting, though, because you feel
well,
it's hypocritical
anyone
of them.
that talks down on their own kind, especially the men,
Okay.
to me, it's like they're sitting there saying, I've heard these women on their
Okay.
protests, even in their
Okay.
Facebook wall, saying, why can't we just treat people equally? Why do we have to discriminate based on their race? Okay, that's hypocritical because I correct them, say, now wait a minute, you don't even like your own race. Okay, so how can you say that? I'm all for protecting our grandmas
Because
and
they're saying
granddads.
that there's a hate crime being committed, right? It's very for me to walk into a
Oh,
room.
hate crime, yeah, that's different. I'm
Is
against
it?
that, but
That's what we're
I
talking
don't.
about, though. They're talking about hate crime. Stop Asian hate isn't saying, hey, stop Asian hate doesn't cover stuff like making small genital jokes, like saying Asian men aren't sexy. That's saying that Asian food is somehow magically special or they're good at math. Those are all problematic. Those are all things we should try to tackle. But stop Asian hate is a very focused thing. It's let's stop all the hate crimes, right? Like the African American diaspora and the larger African diaspora have a huge number of different problems. But when they say Black Lives Matter, they're saying maybe you could stop killing us in the streets. Like, you could protest back and say, hey, maybe we should talk about other types of crime. We should talk about other types of violence. But in the context of a BLM rally, for you to come in and say, well, let's talk about other stuff, you just seem obnoxious. Like, you don't go to a 5K breast cancer run and say, hey, why don't we talk about prostate cancer? Prostate cancer affects men. It's like, okay, it's a bunch of women there, right? Yeah. It's a bunch of people talking about Asian grandmas being hate crimed, and you're coming in and telling them, hey, let's talk about racism in all its forms. But we haven't stopped addressing the hate crimes. Like, hate crimes have not stopped, right? Like, I'm looking at all these different things from here in New York, from actually I take it back. It just seems to be in British Columbia, in New York City, in San Francisco. Like, it's still happening. There's still hate crimes happening to these Asian grandmas. Is that not something we should tackle first? Like, we can talk about small dick jokes and math jokes later, but maybe we should focus on grandmas not dying. Isn't that fair?
Well, I mean, I'm not saying take the focus on that. There's all kinds of issues.
But it sounds like you're saying these Filipino women should shut up while they're being racist towards Filipino men. Is that
Well,
what
that's
I'm putting words in your mouth?
when I hear it depends. If they're just sticking to the topic, hey, let's protect our grandmas and grandpas. I understand that. But when they start going more in explanation, saying like, why is it that people gotta hate us for being Asian? Why can't we just treat each other equally? That's what I'm tackling. I'm like, now
Okay.
wait a minute. Okay, it's one thing if you say, hey, I'm protest about people going after these old senior citizen because they're Asian. I'm all for that. But when they add in there, like, well, why are we attacking? Why can't we just treat people equally? Because that's what God put us here. We're all God's children. Okay, why do
Who's
we
saying
have to
that?
care
In what
about?
context?
Why do we have
Right?
to care about the race? That's what I'm talking about. And
They're
that's what I'm
saying that
talking
people are
about.
being attacked on the basis of their race. Right? Like,
Yeah.
if that grandma was white or black or Native American or any other ethnicity, she probably would have been attacked, right? And in fact, like, you can look at how there are Japanese people being mistaken for Chinese and being attacked. So they're being attacked purely on the basis of their race. That's what they're protesting. So therefore, I don't see that as hypocritical.
No, no, no. I agree with you. They're protesting that, but I'm not saying all the now. When we're talking about the Asians protesting against stopping, I'm not saying all the Asians are on the same level. Some of them, that's what they're strictly about, which I'm on their side. But I've heard many of them vocally come out and say, well, people should treat each other equally, not judged by race. We should love one another because that's what God would want. I mean, when you're starting to say stuff like that, now you're talking about racism in general, not just going toward the our grandmas and grandpas getting killed or attacked. They're adding just like hate in general. Like, why can't people just like people for who they are, not go by their race? That's what I'm attacking them on. I'm not attacking about You know what I'm
Do
saying?
you, do
That's
you,
what if they make that statement. Now, if they don't make the statement, they're just saying, "Hey, stop Asian. Hey, got a predator." I'm on their side. But once they start getting out of that avenue and they start talking about, like what I just said earlier, like, well, we should treat people equally and not go by the race, and I'm going, no, wait a minute. Are we switching, the issue here from violence to just treating people equally, not judging by the race? Because that's when I step in, when I know some of these people personally, and I say, hold on now. I'm all for, stopping hate beating up our grandmas and grandpas, but now you're saying, well, we should treat people equally and love everybody, one another, no matter what. That's where I step in and say, you're a hypocrite, okay? Because you don't even like your own men. And you got a sign saying stop Asian hate. I said, that doesn't make any sense to me.
okay.
But I'm not saying all the Asians are thinking that way or saying that. Just the ones that I know who
Well,
are
okay,
always talking about Asian.
I will admit that it is hypocritical for someone to say, "Hey, we should."
That's what I'm referring to. I'm like I say, I'm all for stopping the Asian violence, but I'm not all for just
Violence.
here. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Okay, but okay,
But
I'm gonna move the goalpost a little bit here and ask, why does it matter if they're a hypocrite though? Like, why does that matter in the first place?
because of the fact that it's a weekly thing that I go through with
Okay,
Asian hate on Asian hate. I work in a restaurant,
okay,
and I can tell you how many times when it comes to especially Philippine customers, how they just treat me awfully. I mean, like the Tagalog, okay,
okay.
and I have to explain to them, look, I'm adopted by a white family, and besides, statistics show that 90% of Filipino Americans raised in America only speak English. But when they sit there and they point that finger at me saying you're not a real Filipino, that's a racist statement right there. This is a weekly thing I go through. And I get tired of too, like, I'm almost 50 years old and, I don't have a problem with interracial dating, but there are so many people I know who are half Asian, half white. And I discuss with other racists, how many half Asian, half white Americans you see marrying Asian people? I've seen two my entire life. The Asian community agrees, says, yeah, you're right. Their half's like, you know what? I never thought about that, but now I think about it, you're right. Okay. I know a lot of them personally.
Well,
I talk them to the jail.
let me have you pause for a second here. So, when you say that this is Asian hate, that's where you start to lose me. Because, like I said, that original slogan, Stop Asian Hate, isn't about all stereotypes or all Asian hate. It's specifically about hate crimes, right?
Exactly. That's what it's supposed to be about.
Okay,
That you're exact.
so let's not okay, so
That's what it's supposed to be about. But
let's not
it's
sink
kind
down
of
to the
like
level of hypocrites. Let's not abuse that term the way they're abusing it. If they're saying stuff like stop Asian hate and then expanding it to stuff like dating preferences, that's bad. But let's not do the same thing as them. Because let's make sure we treat stop Asian hate as what it is, a slogan specifically for hate crimes. Now, that out of the way, let's break down some of what you said previously about Asian women, because it doesn't sound like Asian woman right now. Because so far you've talked to me a lot about Filipino women, but nothing
right.
about any other nationality. So is this really
I
about
mean,
Asian women or
other anyone
Filipino
like
women?
Korean.
Go ahead.
No, I've had bad experiences with the Korean ladies and the Vietnamese
Okay.
ladies. I've had bad experience with them. It's a much worse than the Philippine ladies. Now, as far as let's say Vietnamese ladies, I had a Vietnamese girlfriend years ago.
Okay.
Okay, when I used to live in Dallas, it's mostly Vietnamese. I'll give you an example. So, if I meet a Vietnamese woman, she either doesn't like me because I'm Asian or I'm too white. You know what I'm saying? I've heard Age says, the ones that are really in age
Can
says,
you
oh,
repeat
well, you're
that?
too.
I didn't quite get that down. So she said you were too white. What did you mean by that?
Well, the fact that I don't really eat Asian food. Okay. When I'm in a restaurant, for example, everybody stares at me because I'm not eating chopsticks. Okay. Everybody stares at me. And when I ask for a fork, even the staff is like, but you're Asian. Why are you, eating with a fork? I said, because I prefer a fork. I'm not good with chopsticks. Okay, that's examples like this, or like when I was a dancer, for example. Oh my God, everybody thought, everybody. I came in, everybody kept saying, "Well, white women don't like Asian men." But yeah, they're my biggest fans. But when I go to an Asian party, it's always a fight just to get into the door. They're like, you're Asian?" I go, "Yeah, well, why the hell they send you? We wanted a white man." And I says, "Well, unfortunately, they couldn't get you a white man, but this is what you got." I try to make jokes, says, "Well, I am kind of white, I act white," and go, "Well, get the fuck off our porch. We don't fucking want her. We're gonna call the police." I was like, "What?" I says, "I have a right to come here. I'm gonna leave. You don't want me." And it says, "We don't want no Asian man. We want a white man." Even when I worked in the club, the Asians would laugh at me. Okay, being on stage. The white women aren't laughing at me. I'd be thinking Asian women would like me just because I'm Asian. Now, some Asians do like me, the ones like A, but there are many too. The ones that don't like me are the ones that would say, "Well, I like white guys only." And I'm talking about Vietnamese, Koreans, not just Filipinos. I've had that experience. I actually got assaulted one time at a Vietnamese party,
Oh wow.
and they were mad 'cause I was Asian. The
Jeez. Okay,
party went well.
that's terrible, and I'm sorry you went through that. But
It's not
I
just
feel
dating,
like
even on my job, just in general, even a dating scene, not just going by the job, but like
okay.
say, we're talking about underage, right? I've had literally other Asian women, and I like Korean women, I like Chinese women, but I've had many of them. There's some of them too that say, "I only like white guys for these reasons," and then there are the ones that like Asian guys think I'm too white. You know what I'm saying they think it's weird that I am not Asian cultured, and they say I'm too whitewashed. And they hear that accent of mine, that even freaks them out even more. They're just like, an Asian guy with a southern accent? Come on now, stop being funny. Go, "No, that's me." They think that's just
I mean, I
weird.
have to admit, Brian, the first time I met you, I thought you were putting on an accent. I didn't know this is how you actually spoke when I first met you. I mean, you gotta
Yeah.
admit, it's pretty damn rare, California or not, to meet a Filipino man who speaks with a southern accent, right? Especially for us,
It was the
because
same way in the South, too. It was the same way when I was in Texas. I met
okay,
them
okay.
Asian.
Well,
Same.
then you can say that that's fair, right? That was surprising to everyone. That wasn't a never mind. Okay, but we're falling into the trap of what I was worried we'd initially have a problem with, which is we're jumping back and forth with a lot of different topics. I know we're still in the realm of like you having suffered dating mishaps, which I think is an interesting topic that's not really covered much elsewhere on the internet, or at least nowhere I've come across. But that being said, let's fact check some of the things you've said. So the first thing you said was that you think you've experienced Filipino women telling you that they prefer a Caucasian partner because they don't cheat as much, and I think it's very easy to say that's not true, but it's also hard to prove that one or the other. I do, like I said earlier, I agree with you that it's probably unfair for Filipino women to insist that all Filipinos are cheaters. That's because probably people of other ethnicities also cheat. They just don't get they don't get remembered for or penalized as much when they do. However, yeah, then went on and made the claim that the divorce rates are higher between white men and Filipino women versus Filipino men and Filipino women.
Statistically,
What
that's
study are you
true.
talking? I couldn't find any sort of data backing this up. I couldn't even find anything for.
Actually, I did. I just had to type something in,
Okay,
and
what
there's
did
a
you
lot
type?
of data.
Because like I said, the
Hold on,
problem
I did.
is I don't find anything online for specifically Filipino versus just Asian, right? Like I have white Asian breakup divorce data, but I can't find anything for specifically Filipino men and Filipino women versus, you know.
Well, like I said, I typed it in. I'm trying to look
What
at my
did you
search
type in?
right now.
Let me type it in with you.
Fine.
What?
What percentage is it? I put in. Hold on, let me make sure because it came in differently once I typed it in.
Uh
Put
huh.
like our Philip. Okay. Oh yeah, the hidden truth about what I type in, are Filipinos known to hold on, 'cause I already typed in. What the heck?
You could go
Yeah.
to your
But
history.
I'm on the site where I put in something like Philippine women or they stay married to are Filipinos known to marry outside the race compared to, well geez, it's not coming up all the way. But when I typed it in,
Okay, here's something from
this,
the Pew Research
this is
Center.
what it's gonna say. The hidden truth about multi-marriages, the Filipino American. Seeing that on scholar blogs at Emory.org.
What's
Okay.
the title? What's the
Um,
title?
hidden truth about multiracial marriage, the Filipino American. And then there's
Scholar blogs. Yeah, I found it, but this is a blog post. Let's see what let's see what their source
no,
is. Okay.
but but overall, just interracial marriages,
Oh.
according, when I look at all these reports on
Okay.
Google,
Yeah.
every one of them are saying the same thing. It seems like the only real success ones that make it are black women with white men. They have a lower divorce rate compared to all the other
Okay, but
racial marriage.
I don't think it's fair at all to say that the success of a relationship is whether or not two people stay married, because first of all, not everyone marries, right? And second of all, the kind of people who divorce are usually serial divorcers. They're serial monogamous. If they divorce, they tend to remarry and divorce again. So when they say half of all marriages result in a divorce, that's not saying every last that doesn't mean every other couple is going to have a divorce. It means that half of all marriages. So it's very much possible for one person and another person to get married, divorced, find another person, married, divorced. That
Yeah,
doesn't mean
that's
that
true.
couples are getting divorced. So it's really hard to navigate this data to draw the conclusion that Filipino men in general are more faithful or not. Besides, you also have to remember, and I'm slightly ashamed to admit this, right? Like in
I
Asian
never said
culture,
Filipino men are more faithful. I never said
that's
that.
what you
I'm just
said. But no, no,
saying.
we're recording this. We have a recording of you saying that. You said
What I
that
said is
Filipino
Filipino
women
men said
prefer
that
white men
Filipino
because they said
men
they were
are
more
cheaters and
faithful,
white
and
men
they
are more
called Filipino
faithful.
men cheaters, right?
Yeah. What I said
Uh
is
huh.
Filipino women said they go for white men because Filipino men are cheaters and white men are more faithful. That's what I said.
Right, but I'm saying
I'm not saying that I'm not saying that Filipinos are better than white men. That's what I'm saying. What I'm saying is they think the solution is you go for white
uh
men, they never leave you. Filipino men cheat too. I'm not saying Filipino men are better. What I'm saying is Filipino women are saying I go for the white man because white men don't cheat. You marry them, they stay with you forever. Filipino men, they cheat.
well, I
That's
mean,
what they're saying. I'm not saying Filipino men cheat. What I'm trying to argue these women, I say, look, I told these women, I said, look, I'm sure Filipino men cheat. They're men. Men are dogs, no matter where you're from.
well,
Men cheat.
I
Whether
think
you're
people are
black.
dogs, but
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But the point I'm trying to make is they believe white men are more faithful than Filipino men,
okay,
and
but
based on what they're
that's not
telling
the
me,
claim, nor is that the data. We're not talking about the claim that Filipino men or white men cheat more or less. We're not talking about cheating at all. We're not talking about faithfulness. We're talking about divorce, because you can definitely cheat and not divorce, right?
yeah.
So let's talk
But like
about
I
the
said,
data.
according to the stats,
What
according to
stats?
stats,
What stats?
Asian women married to white men
Okay.
compare. We're not. Let's get off the Philippine women in
Because
general.
I'm
Just
looking
Asian.
at this blog you cited, right? It's saying that from the 2000 U.S. Census, that Filipino Americans are
Mhm.
more likely to marry whites than other Asians. But that seems to be true for male and female. It doesn't mean on average a Filipino is more likely to marry a non-Filipino person. It's just that they're more likely than other Asians to marry outside of their own nationality. Where is the data showing that Filipino women will actually, on average, marry more white men than Filipino men? Or are you not making that claim at all?
Actually, not only got by from what I've seen, but the data that I read up in all these reports
Well,
saying
what other
the
reports?
biggest
Let's
the
look at those
biggest
reports
ethnicity
together.
that marry outside the race are Philippine women. Out of all the races in America, the biggest percent of people that marry outside the race are the Filipino community.
Right, that's what we're looking at. But that's not the same thing as saying that they, on average, marry. Like, okay, how about this? This is saying that Filipino women are more likely than other ethnicities to marry outside their own race. This is not saying that Filipino women, on average, marry outside their race as opposed to within their race. Does that make sense?
I would say Filipino women in general that are raised in America marry outside the Asian
But
race. If
where
you
is
want
the
to,
evidence to back up this claim of yours? I don't. That's not what this data is
I see
saying.
it all over. I see it all
Okay,
over.
then it should be
You
very,
tap on
very
me. I see
easy
it
for you to pull up a
all
source for
over.
me, right? Let me see this source.
Yeah,
Okay?
in. Monday. Hold
Because, like
on,
I
if I
said, this
remember.
data does not show that on average a Filipino woman will marry a white man, just that she's simply more likely to do so than other ethnicities.
Oh, you take Philippine women that come here with their husbands from the
See,
Philippines,
that's not what this
and
data
they're
says, right? This data
naturalized.
is talking about
That's
marriages
going.
here.
They're going to be considered Filipino Americans when they sign a shot at U.S.
But
citizenship.
that's not what the
What I'm
census
trying
is.
to say. What I'm trying to say
Okay.
is, you take two Filipinos, like the nurses that come over here from the
Okay.
Philippines. A lot of Filipino nurses come here,
Okay.
and a lot of them married Filipino men are from the Philippines. And in years down the road, they become U.S. citizens. So in the statistics, they're going to be considered a Filipino American woman staying with a Filipino man. But what my point is when I meet Philippine marriages aged 27 and up that are married, one thing they all have in common that I've seen is they're from the Philippines. I can count on both my fingers. If you say how many Filipino Americans that are raised in America are married to Filipino men, you know how many I've counted personally? I live in 3 different states. I see Philippine couples all the time. You know how many I counted personally?
How many?
No more than 10
Okay.
out of
But
20
Brian, that
years.
is not. You are not some statistician who's going around interviewing Filipino women all the time. It's something you do in
Actually,
your
I
own
did.
life.
Actually, I did. I've interviewed hundreds of
Even
Philippine
if you
women.
interviewed literally tens of thousands of these women, unless you have
Mhm.
compiled this data in such a way that it's verifiable, it's just anecdotal evidence. Like, I'm sorry that you've suffered these unfairness, these unfair situations of yours. But that's not to say that see this is what I was worried about earlier, right? You're going from my this was my personal experience, which was awful. I get that. I sympathize. But to take that and then extrapolate and say, oh, to take that experience and say, oh, Filipino women are this or that, unless you have data to back up this claim, I like you
Well,
don't
I'll tell you the experience that I have.
you can okay,
Okay,
you can tell me as many experiences you
we were talking
want that
about
you want to
race or
hear
anything
about them,
else.
but that is not proof
Yeah,
that Filipino women are this or that. I want to hear about them, right? This podcast is
yeah,
not just about facts and data. It's also about our own lived experiences. I think that's important, and I hope in the future maybe we can
yeah.
bring on some guests to interview. But
I can't find any Filipino every Filipino American man that I know of that likes Philippine women that are age 30 and up. Every one of them that are single that I personally met will admit to me, man, it's hard to find a Philippine woman, and they give the same reason what I told
well,
them.
that's kind of
I
unfair
have
though.
a
You're
daughter
interviewing single men, right? You're interviewing single men. The other Filipino guys are probably married,
single.
right?
I want to marry a Philippine woman,
Okay,
Ed. I want to marry a Philippine woman,
okay.
but they don't want me because I'm Filipino. When I first noticed this 20 years ago, I'm thinking, is it just me? Maybe it's me. But as years roll on by, and I meet other Filipino American men who are wanting to get married to a Philippine woman and are single, they said the same exact thing I said, whether it's in Texas, whether it's in California. They complain about the same thing to me, saying, I have to go to the Philippines to find my Philippine wife. A doctor. If you're a trauma surgeon, I had a friend who's a trauma surgeon.
Okay.
Educated man, makes good money. He wanted a Philippine woman. He told me the same thing too. He said, Brian, I want a Philippine woman, but the Philippine woman says, sorry, I don't like Philippine. He's a doctor. For crying out loud. I mean, who would want to marry a doctor?
Me,
He had to go to the
I wouldn't want to
Philippines.
marry a doctor personally.
He personally had to go to the Philippines and find a Philippine woman because he wanted a Philippine woman. Now, look, I can get white women. I had a lot. Look, I've been with every race. I date every race. I have nothing against any race.
Congratulations.
My reason for not wanting to marry outside my race is because the mixed kids you have that are part Asian, a lot of them are having identity crisis.
Right, but
a lot of them hate being.
I
they
think that's a
hate
little bit
being.
unfair, right? Like because I'm of the same opinion. Where I thought about like I'm planning on traveling to Japan in a few years, right? I'm planning to travel there and teach, but I don't think I would ever want to try and have children with a Japanese woman because of exactly what you're talking about. That they would experience bullying and stigmatization because Japan is a wonderful country. I like a lot of things about Japan, but they're very xenophobic. And mixed children are called hafu. They get bullied in class. They're treated different. They have a harder time. They have identity crisis. Absolutely. But that's not the fault of the child. That doesn't mean the child shouldn't exist, right? Shouldn't that mean we should turn around and say, hey, society is messed up? Like if one of us ends up having a child who is bound to a wheelchair, we don't say, oh, this child shouldn't exist. We say maybe society should be accommodating for people with wheelchairs, right? I think I often hear this argument for LGBTQIA plus individuals, where it's like, oh, if you're queer or trans, you're more likely to commit suicide, so you shouldn't be trans. But maybe the problem is that trans people are bullied more. Not that they're somehow more prone to suicide, it's because they're bullied more, so we should tackle the bullying. I don't think the solution to mixed kids having an identity crisis, suffering from racism and bullying, is to just have them not exist. It should be to tackle the bullying.
No, I'm not saying that.
It sounds like you're saying they shouldn't exist because they suffer.
No. I'm saying I don't want a mixed kid because I don't want to have to go through my child saying I hate Filipinos or I hate Asians. Okay? I've known so many half white, half Asians, whether it was in Texas, Arkansas, or even here in California. When I talk to them, they're all saying the same thing to me. I said, why do you hate your Asian side so much? Every one of them had the same deal. They all said the same thing. Well, my mother, who's Asian, she keeps telling me I need to marry, the Asian, whatever she is, or it's Japanese, Korean. Okay, that's one reason. Then they say, too, I can't speak Asian language, and therefore my extended relatives from my Asian side tell me I'm not a real Asian. I should be ashamed of myself, so I feel ostracized. When I go to my daddy's side, they're open arms. They don't tell me who I have to marry. They don't tell me to speak another language. As long as I don't give them any bullshit, they're cool with me. I hear this constant half white, half Asian people. And in a way I can understand that because me, even though I'm adopted, I'm pure Asian, I go through the same thing with the Filipino community. My own Philippine family, my biological family, for example, they think it's awful that I can't speak Tagalog. And I just say, now, wait a minute. Then why'd you give me to a white family then? You know what I'm saying? I mean, you can't expect me to learn how to speak Tagalog if you put me with a white family. Okay, so I can kind of understand, why when I was younger and I heard these things from the half white, half Asian people, especially my friends, said, you shouldn't be thinking that way. I still don't think they should be hating them. But as I got older and I started getting more involved in the Asian community and I see how I'm treated, I can understand now how half white, half Asian people feel because I'm treated just like them. They ostracize me because I don't speak the language, or I don't want to marry who, when the relatives say this is who you need to marry. I'm the type of guy that says, hey, I'll marry who the fuck I want. Okay, if it don't work out, it's my fault. I don't put it on your fault. But that seems to be a problem in a lot of the Asians, where you're Korean, Japanese, Vietnamese, Filipino. It seems like a lot of people go by what their family wants. Not saying all of them, but a lot of them do. Definitely the ones who come from Asia. I think the children are more submissive to their parents on what they want compared to like Asian Americans raised here.
Well,
Okay, when I had a
I
Vietnamese
think it's fair
girlfriend,
to
her
say
family didn't
that
even approve. What's that?
I think it's
What's
fair to
that?
say that in Eastern culture, filial piety, respecting your elders, or being more conformist with what the group wants, is a more prevalent feature of Eastern society versus Western society. That's fair. But let's take a step back again and look at the bigger picture because we're getting lost in the minutia of your stories, right? Like you've talked about so many different things, but let's get back to the common theme with from all these different stories you've mentioned, which is that it seems that Asian women don't want to date Asian men, but you then went on to say that that's not about Asia. You're saying that Filipino women raised here tend to date Filipino men in their youth, but don't want end up wanting to marry into Filip don't wind up wanting to marry a Filipino man. Am I understanding correctly?
The Filipino American woman raised here, when they're young, like high school and college, most part they're going to be with Filipino men. But when the relationship goes bad, it's like they're traumatized by it and they blame it on because the man is Filipino by saying, well, he's a cheater, so I won't date Filipino men anymore. My argument to them is like, but white men cheat too.
So, what makes
Okay.
you so sure that there are these Filipino women going around having dated white men saying that they don't cheat? Because either because here's the thing: if white men do cheat, because they do, because men
Oh,
cheat,
Filipino men, just like no,
wouldn't
Filipino
they?
men cheat too.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Cheats. Filipino
Yeah,
men,
yeah,
white
yeah,
men,
yeah.
black
I'm
men,
saying,
they all cheat.
why would a Filipino woman not be traumatized by being cheated on by a white man?
You know what? I have talked to some women like that
Okay,
that get white men, like say even ones that are divorced.
okay.
And some of them, I have had that experience. Women who I came interested in, they said white men cheat. Like, then why the hell? Why don't you think white men are cheaters? Because now you're saying that they don't, but you just got cheated by one. I said, how can you justify that now? Did you learn your lesson? You know what some of them end up saying?
Okay.
Well, they make more money anyway, and having babies with them, my kids are going to be models or possible actors. They're going to fit in society better. I mean, I'm like, so which one is it? First he says cheating. Go, well, yeah, that's what it was, but still at the same time, white men still make more money, and that's when I step in. I says, prove to me that white men make more money than Filipino women. They can't answer the question. Kind of like you saying, Brian, there's no stats. When these Filipino want to talk about this, the economic part, I'll tell if anyone says, what proof do you have?
I
They can't
think
prove
it's
it.
I think it's 100% fair for a Filipino woman to say that they think their dating pool of white men on average make more money than Filipino men. Because hear me out. I'm not saying that white men on average make more money than Filipino men. That may or may not be true. It doesn't matter. The reason I think what I think is because when they're looking at Filipino men to date, it's all Filipino men, right? But the kind
That's what
of
they tell me.
okay, but the kind of white men who would want to or go after Filipino women probably are upper middle or middle class, right? Like if you have
Actually,
some poor,
it's not.
go ahead.
It's not. I've actually
Really?
researched a lot of men. So, for example, the Filipino
You're telling me this
women,
white boy in some trailer trash sort of nonsense, trailer trash sort of environment is going after Filipino women, and these Filipino women are receptive to their advances?
Philippines, yes. The
Really? You're
ones, the
telling me if
ones
there's
that
a
are
white
breaking that.
trash trailer park white boy, and he asks a Filipino woman out, she's gonna say, "Oh, he's rich." Really?
Yes, in
What
the
the fuck?
Philippines.
I don't. In the
In the
Philippines,
Philippines, that
we're
is.
not talking about the Philippines though, right? We're talking about these
But hold
Filipino
on.
women you've met
But they
here.
marry these men to come to
Oh
America.
come on!
Therefore,
Hold on. You're telling me there's trailer park poor white men going on the internet, finding Filipino women, and bringing them over?
well, let me tell you what kind of men it is. A lot of it is retired enlisted military men.
Well,
I've
they
talked
ain't
a lot
poor
of
then, are they?
them.
If you're a retired military man,
$1,000 a
you got a
month.
military pension, huh?
$1,000 a month?
That's
I
a
mean,
heck
is
of a
that really
lot
good
more
money?
than some. That's a heck of a lot more than some random dude without a 401k, without a social security,
Okay,
without a.
okay, okay. Let me tell you what I'm talking about. When I'm in the Philippines and I meet a woman, let's say I'm middle class, okay? When they look at me, the average age of the white foreigner is 51 years old. You'll see a 23-year-old girl, a 50-something-year-old man, and they'll look at me and say, well, Filipino men don't work. Filipino men are lazy. This white man is rich. And I go, what is your rich? I go, he makes 50,000 pesos a month. I says, well, in the Philippines, that's very stable. But in America, that's not going to be stable. I said, so you're going to look at me and compare me to that man who wore the same shirt every day, doesn't take a bath, and you're going to sit there and tell me that he's a better man than me because he makes 50,000. Says, do you know what my salary is? I never even told you my salary.
Maybe don't
They go,
reveal.
well,
Maybe
you're a
don't
man.
reveal your salary on a broadcast. I'm
Of
saying
course
that
not.
that's not
Of course not.
indicative of anything. Like
Yeah.
again, I'm sorry you dealt with that jerk who seemed to be prejudiced towards you, a Filipino man. But that's not evidence of Filipino women in general not going for Filipino guys. And we
That's
were
what I was
initially
hearing.
talking about Filipino women here, not in the Philippines. But fine. What?
But the Filipino women in the Philippines, a lot of them end up marrying the men and coming
Unless
here.
you can
There's a
give me
lot of
some sort of.
there's a lot of you call it mail order brides. The Philippines is the most known country for foreigners to marry a woman outside and bring them here out of any other country. I'm other country, but the
Do you
Philippines
have
is the
any
number one
evidence to back up these claims? Because I'm getting frustrated now.
country there.
You've said so far
Documentaries.
that there's less divorce between Asians versus Asians and whites. I did not see data indicating this. You said that 90% of half of mixed children can't speak their Asian mother or Asian father's language. I don't have any data for this. And you've said that the average salary of a Filipino is higher than the average salary of a white person, and that like I don't have any data here. These are just wild claims. And even if you proved every last one of these things to be false, that white men and Asian, that white and Asian, if you even manage to prove the divorce rates among whites and Filipinos are higher, that they don't speak the language any better, that their salaries are indeed higher, and that they do have to go back to find a wife, that they don't want to marry Filipino men in general. That is the thesis you're making, right? Because all these other things build up towards your
Let me make
thesis
it
of
simplified. Let
them
me
wanting to marry
simplify it.
Filipino men. So I
There's
don't
two
see how you
there's
could possibly prove to me that this is true, that Filipino women don't want to marry Filipino men, right? Because that's
There's
the
two
crux of the
top
argument.
Philippine. Okay, let's talk about the two top Philippine women because
Excuse me?
we didn't get to that part of the detail. You got Filipino women who are from the Philippines, raised there, and they come here as adults. Then you got the Filipino women who are raised here. Okay, the Filipino women that are raised here like white men, they're going to say the same reason because Filipino men cheat. That's their reason. But the Filipino women that are here, that came here as adults, that married white men, they'll say three reasons. Filipino men cheat, a white man can give me a blue-eyed, white-skinned babies, and white men make more money. It's either one of those three
Okay, but
reasons,
even
two of
if
those
you
three.
disprove all of those things, that's not evidence that Filipino women aren't marrying Filipino men. Because that's what you're arguing, right? Like I understand
Can you
that
disprove-
they're
can
making
you
these.
disprove?
Go ahead.
Let me ask you, can you disprove that theory?
That's not how this works. If you come to me with a claim, the burden is on you to prove it, not me to disprove it from being true.
Well, I can say this. In terms of salary, you said there's no data.
No, I didn't say there's no data. I'm saying you haven't given me any.
Every
And even
Hispanic,
if you,
that I mean, every black person will agree that Asians make more money than white.
that's bollocks. I'm gonna call bollocks right now. Unless you can find, I don't believe you, and unless you can give me some, bureau. I remember you saying the Bureau of Labor Statistics had something to prove this. Okay, send me that link.
Yeah.
I'll open it on the stream. But again, you're missing the point, man. I'm saying those women who are saying that white men don't cheat, that my kids will come out looking like models, and that white men make more money. It doesn't matter. if those claims are true or false, because they're still marrying white men. You're not going to convince them otherwise, data or not, right? I strongly doubt. I take that back. I will bet money that there is probably not a single Filipina listening to us two guys talking about this issue who's going to go, you know what? I don't think I'm going to marry a white man because it turns out they do cheat. Turns out that my baby's not going to look amazing and they don't make more money than Filipino men. So I'm going to change my mind. I just don't see that happening. So instead, you're making this claim that a Filipino woman shouldn't marry white men on false pretenses. But like, I don't think we're going to dissuade them of that. And more importantly, why is that an issue? Like, why is it a Filipino woman's responsibility to not believe these falsehoods and marry a Filipino man? Like, what? It's all very strange to me as an outsider, right? Like,
you said why? Why? Yeah. Because they think even when they marry a white man, have kids, they're expecting their son and daughter to have Philippine values, and they have American values. And I couldn't tell you how many I meet that complain to me.
Oh, okay.
You know,
so this is really what they're saying. Like, so we're helping Filipino women? Is that what this is about?
What's that?
This is about helping Filipino women?
When you're asking me what I was answering your question, Filipino women have that expectation that when they have mixed kids, they're going to have Philippine values, just like what they have when they're raised in the Philippines. It doesn't work out that way. And like I say, how many half-white, half-Philippine people, man or woman, do you see marrying Philippine people? Or even how many half-white, half-Asian people, or Korean or whatever?
But that's what I'm trying to say, Brian. That's what I'm trying to say. It doesn't matter how many.
Now, I did look that up. There is no data to prove that. But you ask any Asian, they will agree with me and say there is.
Oh, come on.
They have never
seen a half-white person. You're better than this.
You know,
look,
how many half-Asian, half-white people do you know married to Asian people? You tell me.
It doesn't matter, Brian.
No. Answer. You say don't matter. Do you know any half-white, half-Asian people that are married to Asian people? It
doesn't matter if I know a ton or I know none. Because here's the thing. Here's a very easy example. I can probably survey 100 moms, and 90 of them are going to tell me, oh yeah, you can't let your kid go out in the cold. They're going to get cold and they're going to get sick. That's not how that works, right? Everyone believes that if you get cold, you're going to get the cold. But you need to have the infection to begin with. Being cold weakens your immune system, makes you more likely to get sick, but it's not going to cause you to become sick. But so just because everyone believes something, well, I can't, I see it a lot myself, but that doesn't prove Jack Diddley squat. Right? Because I am one man. You are one man. You lived in 3 states. I've lived in a few different places too. But that doesn't... I'm not saying your experience doesn't matter.
Different places.
Go ahead.
You said different places, or you mean different places in California or different states?
I lived in different countries, but I didn't want to get into that right now. The point is simply this. It doesn't matter what our lived experiences are in the context of trying to make sweeping generalizations. Like, I think your experiences are valuable. I think mine are valuable. I think if we can get some other Filipinos or Koreans or Indians, Bangladeshi people on here, and we can interview them and see what their life is like, I think that's valuable. I think we should hear their voices. But it's very problematic for me for you to say, here's my experience, here's some other people's experiences who they shared with me, and therefore this whole group of Filipino women are this or that, right? Like that's just I just don't think that's fair to Filipino women. Go ahead.
Fairness, not part of the Philippine community. That'd be like me. Like, you know more about the Chinese culture than I do. If you're telling me something negative about the Chinese people, I'm not going to agree or disagree, because I would sit there and say, you know what? I don't know much about the Chinese community like you do. So I can't tell you, like, you can't even talk, like, if you just came in and said, hey, Brian, Chinese women doing this, I can't sit there and say, well, I disagree with you, because you know more about that community than I do. I'm sure you've been to China. I haven't. I've been to the Philippines millions of times. I'm here around the Philippine community. So even though you're Asian like me, you're Chinese, you're not exposed around the Filipinos like the way I am, talking about these topics. I
Okay, that's true.
specifically go for Philippine women. That's what I'm getting at.
But there's a difference
So,
between me saying, hey, in my personal experience, this happened with my Chinese grandma, I see these problems in the Chinese community. You're not saying that I noticed Filipino women doing this. You're saying that Filipino women in general don't marry Filipino men. That's what I take issue with,
no,
right?
you're twisting it. I said Filipino American women that are raised. Remember, there's what we call the Filipinos in the Philippines that come here. There's two types of Filipino people. There's the ones that come here as adults, and there's the ones that are raised here. Now, if you're Filipino, let's say come to the Philippines at 10 years old and you're an adult, you're pretty much going to be cultural, domesticated. Okay,
Okay, but
but
you're
what
missing
I'm
the
talking
point there.
about,
I'm not saying it matters
there's two
what group you're
types of
talking about.
women.
I'm saying the difference is you're talking about the problem isn't that you're talking about this group or that group. The problem is that you're saying that because I've experienced this, because I've seen others experience this, I'm going to now generalize both groups of Filipino women, and that's weird to me. That's wrong. For me, like,
It's weird.
let me turn this on myself for a second. Right? Let me make this about Chinese people. If I say my Chinese grandma did this, and I have a bunch of my friends tell me their Chinese grandmas do this. I think sometimes Chinese grandmas do this. That's one thing, right? Like it's beginning and end. I've seen this. My friends have seen this. So I think I believe this, right? Beginning and end. You're not doing that. You're saying I saw this. My Filipino friends have told me this. Therefore, Filipino women in general, blah blah blah. That's what I take issue with. Because if we limit the scope of our discussion to simply, here's an experience I've lived, here's an experience some other Filipino men have lived, that's cool. But
Forget about the data.
for you to take that next step and then say Filipino women in general are this or that's where I take issue with. Go ahead.
Well, you can take issue with it, but it's like I said that you're not involved in the Philippine community like the way I am. Kind of like like I can't debate you on Chinese people. If you were to sit there and tell me anything negative, that would seem weird to me. I would say,
you
what?
don't need to be black to speak on black issues. You don't need to be Asian
No,
to speak on
no,
Asian
no, I'm
issues.
just saying. I could not tell you what's going on with those issues because I don't know. I would just say, wow, I'm interested to hear about it.
Okay.
That's awful. I could say I never heard of that. But, like say, you said you don't find no data, but I looked at a lot of data
You guys share
about
the data with me. We can get back to it in the next episode. But I'm pointing out there's no such thing as I mean, not that I know of at least, right? Maybe you can prove me wrong. I don't know of any study where they're going around interviewing women in the Philippines at random and saying, "Would you marry a Filipino man?" And then gathering this survey data. If you find a study like that, that's in Tagalog or English, that'd be brilliant. What?
There is no study.
Okay.
I tried looking up
Okay.
studies,
Right.
and I can tell you the reason why is
Okay.
issues. When it comes to issues of Asians talking about race with other Asians, a lot of them don't like to be open about it. So, like when I try to talk to Filipino men, let's say in the Philippines, about what's going on,
Okay.
they don't want to hear it. It's like, you know what? This is negative stuff. I don't want to hear it. And I'm like, but you should hear it. They go, I don't want to hear this. Okay, I don't care. That's what they're going to say. Okay,
but why should they care though?
Because I know many of them. I know many of them, especially my cousin, for example.
But that's
Her
not-
husband and I got into it. We had this conversation. He says, "Man, how dare you say about Phil? My wife loves me. She loves Filipino, but you know what she told me behind his back? Oh, I would prefer a white man." You know what I'm saying? She told me that. But does her husband know
we can
that?
separate these
No,
two
he
things,
doesn't.
right? We can separate that Asian women are racist towards Philip. Excuse me. Let's stop saying Asian because I feel like it's not. So
Yeah.
it's one thing to say a lot of Filipino women are racist against Filipino men. They have these unfair prejudices and they have a unfair bias or preference towards white men. But then you make claims about marriage, and this is where I feel like we're getting a little bit lost in the weeds, right? Because once you make a claim that can be verified and you don't verify it, it's just kind of hanging out there, Because like if we
Anybody who
talk,
listens to this podcast, I guarantee if they Google it, you'll see a bunch of studies.
let's Google it. I have Google open right now. Let's go. You can't do this to me, man. You can't just be like, oh, just Google it. Okay, I'm gonna Google it. What do you want
I
me to Google?
did. I also, in turn, yeah, yeah, I've
If you could
read a
give me a
lot of
list of
articles
links,
about
I will
Philippine
write them
women.
down. I will put them in a document, and we can reference it next time together. But we've been going for a while now. I think it's been an hour and a half. So
Yeah, yeah.
let's get some closing thoughts in, and we'll wrap up. So do you want to go first? Or do you want me to go first?
You go first.
Okay.
You're the host. Go ahead.
All right. I think that I think there are far bigger issues in the Asian community that we are dealing with right now in terms of racism than Asian racism. I'm not to say that that's not happening or to minimize what is happening, but I feel like in the grand scheme of things, it's just not that important. But if we are going to talk about it, we should still stay grounded because I feel like there's a big danger here of us grouping Asian. Like I think the idea of us coming in and going, hey, racism bad because you shouldn't prejudge a group before you know the individuals. And then upon meeting the individual, you still have that prejudice, right? Like that's what you're just. I feel like that's what you're describing. Like there's this Filipino woman who's coming in and saying white men are this, this, and that, and then I can come in with data and be like, hey, guess what? They're not this, they're not that, and then despite being proven wrong, they will still turn around and be like, well, I believe it anyway. That is racism, pure and simple. But for us to then turn around and say, hey,
Yeah.
Filipino women are all like this, would make us hypocrites and cause us to not have anyone listen to us. But at the end of the day, I still think it is fair that I still think it's fair to say that there's definitely a lot of Asians who are racist towards other Asians. Like we mostly explore Filipino stuff this time. Next time I can maybe we can look a little bit about the Chinese side of things because I definitely have met Chinese Americans as well as girls from China who say stuff like that they want to date only white guys or they only want to date black guys. Like I'm not trying to say this isn't an issue, but I also am wary of two dudes who have who have had the dating experiences we have had to then go around and say this is what dating is like for all Asian men. Those are my closing thoughts. You go ahead, Brian.
Can say is, just based on what we're talking about, is I never had a Philippine woman in America ever give me a compliment about anything that most men never achieve. From me being a top level male dancer to being, a middle class guy that knows how to save money, to a guy who is good in fitness, to a guy who has no kids, no marriage, a 47-year-old man who is healthy, who looks like he's in his 30s, never had one Filipino woman ever say anything positive about me. Now, people could probably say, look, this, well, it's probably just you. Well, when it comes to white women and Hispanic women, boy, I get a lot of them give me a lot of credit. So I know it can't be me. If the white women, Hispanic women, or even black women were the same thing what the Philippine women were saying, then yeah, it must be me the problem. So I'm just saying that, if people are going to judge, just to the Asian haters out there, before you judge a specific individual who is Asian, you should probably get to know what he is and who he is before you place that stereotype on him. That's my final thought when it comes to Asian haters. Okay? Learn the stats, learn about that individual before you make a judgment on him, and don't just assume because he's Asian that he is this. Okay? Because there's a lot of good people everywhere, there's bad people everywhere. But if you just generalize a certain person based on their race, okay, you're missing out on a lot of opportunity. That's my final thought.
Okay. Well, I think this was a great first session. I think there's a lot of loose threads we can come back to next week, and also some new branches we can explore regarding my own experiences, maybe some of the colleagues you've spoken with over the years. So until next time, thank you for stopping by, and hopefully we have some sort of production value within the next 6 months, some sort of editing for transitions or some graphics, some stats, studies, something. But at the very least, me and Brian will talk to each other, and we'll try to find some of the studies that can back up some of our claims, and hopefully I can present them to you next time. So until then, thank you for listening to Reaching Across the Aisle, AAPI.